It's like with AI. Suddenly everybody is doing AI, and now everybody who's developing a workflow, it's an agent. Well, sorry, it's a state machine. So agentic agents for me is.
Thank you for joining us for the first episode of ALM, Leap Makers interview session. We had the pleasure to welcome Adrian. So Adrian's past experience been for 10 years, and Hapag-Lloyd, of course, being an engineer, software engineer for way longer, but for the last period in Hapag-Lloyd for 10 years, where he saw the potential of AI and spearheaded the launch of the department, which he managed for the last couple of years, working on multiple projects, some of which I had the pleasure to work with or alongside with as a consultant at that time. And right now he's launching his own consultancy AI company, working with multiple companies, integrating some of the cutting edge AI solutions, as well as also working on his own product, launching and more focusing on AI agentic solutions, the next wave AI. Thank you, Adrian, for being here. Maybe you can expand a little bit on my introduction if I missed something.
Yeah, yes, sir. Thank you very much. Can you just repeat that? I loved it. Oh, really, thank you. Yeah, and really glad to be here, and also for the energy that you bring and the opportunity that you give to me. And can I expand on that? Actually, you wrapped it up pretty well. Yeah, what I often I'm saying, like, I'm at the end of the day software engineer to the bone. Basically started kind of 1993 as a youngster, where my father had to subscribe the contract. To subscribe the contract. Because I just loved it to develop things. And yeah, after study, basically, I got this was the first time I got in touch with neural networks and fuzzy logic and evolutionary algorithms. So combinatorial optimization was one of my focus there. And since then, I'm actually dreaming of something like ChatGPT. I had the intention to build it those days. I just didn't want to accept that it's not there, but I had to accept that it was still too early. Basically, I went the path of software engineering because I learned very early to build things that bring value, that you can basically deliver, you can use and solve a problem. And that's also something that makes me up. So that's why I did follow the developments of research in a very practical, hands-on way, having lots of private projects. So besides work, I always had some idea of building robots, pneumatic arm, and then always targeting to come up with a model that is, for example, calibrating the motors or the steering of that arm. Anyway, but finally, somewhere around 2050, I could happily see that science made the step forward into really tangible solutions. So basically libraries, so ready to use libraries where you really could build solutions with them. And yeah, this was a time where I started to reach out into the community and connect, and of course validate and test and run a lot of prototypes on my own, bringing up the first customer-faced chatbot for Hapag-Lloyd, and always in a manner of make or buy approach. And then started to invite consultants who already were into building AI models and were into being in the cloud. And together we ramped up the first AI solutions for Hapag-Lloyd and finally the department. Yeah, that was a great pleasure and big experience, because there are in companies like liner shipping company. It's the fifth biggest in the world. They have basically offices all over the world. So it's whatever you do there, it's always a global impact. You have to deliver to roll out globally in all languages, and also US people run processes differently than German people, than Indian people. So by that, if you automate something, be prepared to adjust few things, few assumptions, so they can use whatever you deliver there. So that's one thing. And the other thing was, of course, the huge amount of transactions. So you solve one mini manual step. It basically generates value in total by thousands and millions of transactions per day, per week, whatever. Yeah, so that was a great opportunity, and that's why for this kind of companies, but for any kind of companies, basically automation is something that is worth to invest in. And with machine learning, we could basically increase the amount of value that you generate per solution.
Exactly.
And nowadays with LLM, of course, as well. So now I think I extended more enough
That's
on me.
amazing. That's amazing. Maybe just to give also a little bit of context for the people not aware about Hapag-Lloyd. Hapag-Lloyd is one of the biggest, I believe the third largest, one of the top five largest logistics company in the world. Have, I believe, one of the biggest container fleets in Europe. Yeah, so definitely it's
They do.
working on logistics on a really large scale use cases, which is amazing actually. That brings me also to what excites me. I think honestly, I agree with you. So even when I was in a smaller consultancy company, I would always want to automate my work because again, that's 10x or multiply the value given per hour or per effort. And now, just as you mentioned with AI, with agents, that's just can be reached at a whole other level, which is part of what excites me at this moment. So the question maybe goes back to you now. At this current moment, what's from a technology person's point of view, what would be the most exciting thing to go towards at this point of time in AI?
Well, I think we can hear it all over. Everybody is talking about agents. I must say, I'm very careful about this term because it's like with AI. Suddenly, everybody, who's developing software is doing AI, and now everybody who's developing a workflow, it's an agent. Well, sorry, it's a state machine. So agents for me is really there. I want to have the autonomy, so a system that is autonomous, self-healing and self-reasoning, and of course can collaborate with other entities, be it other agents, be it a human, right? And it has to basically learn and self-fine-tune itself like an organism, actually, at the end of the day. It doesn't have to be, for me, AGI. That's not necessary for that. I think, for example, cats and dogs get very good along. Yeah, they don't need to have our reasoning capabilities. Still, they can live a good living and deal with the world, with a very complex world. And this is the same what I see in agents. Basically, I would say specialists, but autonomously specialists. So I have to be able to delegate a task to an agent, and the agent has to basically find his way around, learn, adapt, and talk and collaborate with me on the task. Then I'm talking about an agent. So that's why for me an agent has this self-learning, self-improving, and autonomy part in it. So it's everything that's just a workflow using an LLM. Is also, there are plenty of business cases out there that need only that. Yeah, we don't need to have agents for every task. What I'm excited, and I'm excited since 2000 about that. I never accepted. Basically, I'm searching. I'm looking forward to see us like a self-sustainable an entity that is basically learning, adapting, and living in a certain way and fulfilling some tasks and some value, of course. Yeah, that's basically what I'm excited, and I think that we are somewhere at the beginning of an era where it starts to be possible. So we do. There are a lot of people who have already lots of ideas. Me as well. We as well. And yeah, the future, the near future, the mid future will show. Right
Okay.
now, I'm not really seeing real agents.
My question was from a technology point of view also, what would be the advantage also? Like in which use cases more workflow oriented agentic would be more suited? I think it's pretty much clear. But the question is, when we do approach this kind of more advanced agent or like true agents, as you mentioned, are they going to be so much good that they can replace any other pre-existing workflow agentic, or as they call workflow automations AI, or would they be used for very specific, different use cases?
One thing that comes up to my mind now, when you work in basically a big corporate environment, there you have organizationally, you have departments and structures, and you have processes basically that are executed step by step. And if you take a process is built sometimes of sub-process, depends on complexity, right? But at some point you come to a certain task, right? And right now, a human in general, an employee, is covering a set of tasks basically, and making sure that a part of the process is fulfilled. So in general, a sub-process. And there are a lot of tasks where with legacy engineering approach, so the possibilities that we had since 2000 and let's say 2010, 2015, you basically have things where you where the employee has to see something and somehow put it into a system. Yeah, what you're doing is you're translating unstructured information from the real world into the structured system that is specialized basically for this process, and this allows basically at least few things to be automatically triggered, calculated, and produce an output, right? And this is all limited, I love to say, on a regex level in general. For normal business, everyday things, SAP, booking, whatever you take, yeah, there's not much magic. The highest mathematical magic that I saw is a moving average. Maybe you have in the logistics, you do have some traveling salesman implementations out there, right? Fortunately. But in the rest, there's no big mathematical magic in there. Now, because this is like that, you have a lot of steps where a human basically needs his reasoning capability to understand what the input is, what the situation is, how to deal with it, and how to basically use it for the next step. A lot of this kind of manual steps, right, can be now covered thanks to LLM. A lot doesn't mean all of them, right? But still, they are actually very trivial. You have to, and there you can get along with workflows, right? Where people call them agents. There you have the power of LLM to be able to extract named entities, transform basically the unstructured information to structured information. Let me put it like this. Earlier in 2005 or 2010 even, yeah, you could try to use NLP, but actually you boil it down to regular expressions. And by that, you could kind of cover 5% of the cases, right? Now, with NLP, if you did it right, this is basically what we did at Hapag. We managed to increase this 5% to 30 to 40%, but in a very narrow special case, right? That's what email routing, very trivial stuff. Yeah, just knowing, okay, this email goes to that department, right? And this email is spam, the harder part. Anyway, with the LLMs, we basically increased the possibilities correctly, and accuracy is actually all that it takes. If you want to deliver basically automation in an industrial process, it's just not enough to be maybe good. Like in, let's say, even 95% correctness, like hit ratio. I'm not saying accuracy. Can mean that 5% of the cases go wrong. And this depends on the process and the task, what you're doing, and criticality, and volume. Yeah, if 5% of 2 million transactions per, I'm exaggerating now, maybe per minute, goes wrong, well, this is a few 100,000 transactions go wrong. And if each transaction is meaning a booking of a customer, then you have a problem. take basically, anyway, I think you can imagine about that. So I just want to make clear that accuracy that is required is very high if you want really to automate. And automate doesn't mean get a recommendation. Automate means delegate. Yeah, you plug in the input, you plug in your AI, whatever your solution, whatever it is, and then you plug in the consumer of the output, and then you go away. And this basically, and you have to rest assured that your process is not breaking down because 5% of the cases the customer are leaving your shop. Enough, right? And this is something that LLMs increased. So with NLP, you could basically just by NLP, more machine learning, like generating models for trained by data, so by samples,
Can I
right?
stop you just so again you give context
Yes.
here for the viewers? What would be the difference between NLP and models? And just again, what is NLP? Just again for general audience.
Yeah. Okay. So NLP is a special area of data science. So natural language processing is what it's meant, and it's basically the whole area where you are applying machine learning, so developing models to process text, so textual information. In general, it is intent recognition, like classification, binary or multi-class classification. Intent recognition is a classification part, and this is one of the core things that you need to build chatbots earlier. Even today, if you go for agents, many agent frameworks have this function calling, and the first thing that you do with an LLM now is actually you ask the LLM to predict the intent of what has been said, and based on the intent, your function is actually the intent. And we can see that the accuracy is not high enough, is way better. So you can achieve a higher accuracy with less work because you have this pre-trained model with really good representation of knowledge. But this you had to train yourself before LLM. Right now you just have to fine tune. This is also not just have, but to do. And so NLP is basically building models around text, for classification, for named entity recognition, but also for recommendation. That's also kind of a classification at the end of the day. And the LLMs nowadays are basically the superheroes of the NLP. There's also other notions, NLU, natural language understanding. So the LLMs are more about NLU, but I don't really. So it's terminology, and that's not. It's good to know basically when someone is talking about NLP, he's most probably talking about the time before LLMs.
Yeah, exactly.
While LLMs are still about NLP at the end of the day. And NLU, well, it's a bit more than just classification, but yeah, you can have a nice talk in the evening on that.
But what does that mean? So what does that mean going forward? As the LLMs, what would be the next step for now? And again, we go a little bit in depth technically, right? So we will go take a step back a little bit later on and see it from a bigger point of view, from a macro point of view. But just one last question here to dig deeper on this one specifically, because what's the next step? So do you believe, and then here we will go with the difference between a more generalistic approach to an AI agent, which is based on a general, very, very capable model with more context, with RAG and everything needed for it to perform and learn? Or is it more pre-trained, data-heavy training, fine-tuning, specifically done for models to replicate and to learn how to do specific workflows? Is that which ones would be more capable for from your point of view? And am I telling them, first of all, am I saying the correct ones, or maybe you can expand a little bit on the differentiation that I mentioned?
I hope I did get you. So stop me if I'm deviating.
And I mentioned it maybe just to give a little bit of context. I mentioned this because I was in a conversation last time with a colleague about, okay, my idea from a point of view, again, from a more business, also not only technical, a more business than technical person, is that, okay, let's take a model, right? We can just provide it with context about a certain job and with the capability of execution in the browser level, and it will be able to perform. Of course, there is still a delta of the percentage of time that it cannot perform, or like the error percentage. but it would be good enough maybe for a lot of use cases that are maybe not critical. But on the other hand, the other approach that they suggested is let's, instead of this, and this is one that is suggested, is to train the model on a lot of data of this task being executed first. This is the way to go and pre-train model-specific execution, specific workflows. Did I make it a little bit more clear?
Yeah. I mean, we see that that's happening. I think this is not something about either or. I think both. There's a rather opportunity window decision where you decide if it makes sense to train a model from scratch for the specific task that you're aiming for. There you basically have to know, do I have enough data? Is the data, well, let's say accurate, clean enough? Or so how much effort will it take me to get the data that I need to train such a model, bring it to a level that it's really providing the required accuracy at the end. And I can tell you, for automation, for real automation, not recommendation, that's a difference. For recommendation, you can get along with 70% accuracy, 80%, 85%, whatever. It's enough, right? Because a human is reading and acting upon that. And more important, she takes over responsibility of the outcome. But automation means delegation. There you have to be prepared to deliver like 99% accuracy. And the step from 95% to 99, everybody who has trained a model will know that's not linear. So it depends basically on what are your options in the situations where you are, right? And you have to be aware that basically training a model from scratch, right, can be very expensive unless you're lucky. Yeah. For example, you are in a company like Hapag-Lloyd who have their systems laid out there, right? The whole infrastructure on a technical, but also on a software level. So all the data structures are there, and all the masks to input data and drive it through the data structures, right, is there. And then you basically can hook up in a stream of incoming curated data, and you're having 2 million of data points that are inputted by humans. So they're as accurate they can be. Humans do errors. And then you have basically the next, I'm making a bit more understandable maybe, in the database. The input is coming in the first table, and then some other some other person is taking that, doing something and pushing save. And then it ends up in the next table. And you, as an engineer there, know about all the structure and what maps to what. And there you can basically put your AI and just let it learn, train. It's almost as easy as that. You still have to do a lot of cleaning and this kind of stuff. But this is a situation where you can dare to think about training your dedicated model for that specific task, right? You don't have that. Then you have money like Microsoft, OpenAI, or you name it. Collect the data and train your foundational model. And you don't have that, then you actually just don't have this option. And then you can be lucky, because there's a big difference to what it was before. There are foundational models that you just have to fine tune, so that you can fine tune with maybe 1,000 or 2,000 samples, where you earlier required millions of samples. And you had to, even today is very important to clean your data and to put as much business know-how into that as possible. So that can save you a lot of training time and iterations. But still, it's not 2 million. So that's the brave new world. And of course, the open source initiative, that so many models, the weights are available, and they are not only for scientific work. There are also options for real business solutions. And this enables basically a lot of people who can really generate value out of that. And this is basically the decision where you then end up and fine tune something for the solution, or you can go for building your model from scratch. In the end, because I think that your question was also a bit about what will be more successful, right? Taking a generic LLM and fine tune it, or just use it, right? Versus train it specifically. I would say I think you
I just
can
want to
succeed
add,
with
sorry to
both.
interrupt. I just want to add, this is in a context basically of whether is it good to wait until the models are strong enough, or like basically is it like in 1-2 years the models would be strong enough, as you said, that we already can just with a little bit of fine tuning have a good agent, or it's not something we can
No.
avoid.
There's no reason to wait. There was no reason to wait even before the LLMs.
Okay.
It was way harder. So you needed either the special situation of sitting in the middle of a system that gives you the data and having, of course, a corporate budget around it. But still, at the end, it was still possible. And since machine learning started to be doable, and there we just you rather have the upcoming of cloud and computing resources. This is also something that didn't allow a huge, like 90% of the people who today are on it and producing solutions with AI. They couldn't do it because they couldn't afford the required or computing power. And right now it's like anybody of us can go and train a model in the cloud for nothing, just for experimenting, right? So totally different situation. And this is somewhere 2000, since 2010, 2012, I think everybody could have started to do it. And as soon as you can train models, you can orchestrate them to an agent. And yes, of course, the gap that you have to close in 2012 was like this, and now it's like this, right? So it's the chance is higher.
This maybe gives us like a good transition into a bit of a first level macro point of view, which is who is going to be winning in terms like for the entrepreneurs, the technical people building these kind of, and there's a lot of people going into the agentic market right now or trying, working towards it. Are the real winners going to be the one who already like train the models, do all of the effort to make it work right now? Or regardless of that, there will come a certain point that this will be basically obsolete, you know what I mean? And all of that work would be, of course, while still was productive and brought fruit at the time, it would be not needed, and you can just have normal agents already learn a little bit and just perform.
Now, maybe you look how much money did Microsoft OpenAI, however, throw at building the models that we basically learned to like nowadays. And then a DeepSeek is coming, right?
Yeah.
And
Very
is
trying to avoid a
doing it.
DeepSeek situation.
Yeah. So I just want to say that not starting is the first wrong thing that you do. So start doing it with what you have. Hesitating because maybe next month there will be a DeepSeek there that costs less. You just don't know, right? So if you have an intuition, if you see a way and you have the skills at your disposal, this is the time more than it was earlier. Earlier, you needed like a whole organization around you with scientists and so on. Nowadays, the entry barrier level is way lower. So if you're smart and have experience, this helps a lot. Then you can basically start and apply your, let's start with an idea, but of course it's an educated idea, is starting with assumptions on where you see basically that there's a task or some solution that could generate value, a business case in general, right? And where you see that it's most probably you can cover enough of that process that it is and that you want to automate. That's basically what we're talking about now, to generate enough value that it basically makes, I mean, that it justifies the costs and the invest.
Yeah.
And you always have basically you basically have to have an eye on time to market, for example, and build and run costs. So I know I didn't answer now technically, but these are the drivers basically that lets you decide, can I start now? Am I in the right situation? Do I have the skills at my hand? Do I know what it takes? And do I have what it takes? Right? And by that you decide basically how you are approaching, if you even start, or if you go in to another business case where you have what it takes, right?
Yeah.
Having said that, I would say there are a lot of use cases out there that don't even need an agent. Workflows and using LLMs there are tons of use cases or tons of companies who have the processes in place and let people, just to make it clear, route mails. A mail is coming in, oh, they has to go to that department. Or a dispute is coming in, who might be the department to resolve it? And then basically send it and formulate an email. All of us in the bleeding edge area will say, wait a minute, you can automate that. Yes, but they don't know it, or it has to happen. So right now, I would say use this huge opportunity that we have now and automate as many as possible of this micro manual tasks. They're easily identifiable, and with the today availability of LLMs and their optimizations towards a less requirement on computing power. So they're minimizing it, right? It's way you basically can deploy a solution as a browser solution. So you don't have to build up infrastructure around the booking guy there just to help him automate two of his manual tasks, right? These are things that are deciding what you do, and if you go for agents, I do see basically a very good chance that it is possible today if you orchestrate the different different areas of the whole AI spectrum. One of it is definitely LLM, so having a good representation and fairly reliable understanding of in unstructured textual and speech information input. This is key to be able to collaborate with the user, because whatever you build, no matter how much AI is it, if there is not a user who uses it, it has no value. Okay. So that's why this is one part. And collaboration, I would say, because I said autonomy, we see that we people are very autonomous, yeah, but the greatest value comes when we work together. So autonomy doesn't mean that you can skip the collaboration. Collaboration is even very important, right? And when you talk of some people who are talking about agents are rather focusing on this collaboration and not so much on the self intelligence within that agent. So I'm more the guy on the self intelligence of the agent.
Well, can I then, because I think the answer what you mentioned, the question that I mentioned, is something that both, as mentioned, entrepreneurs, business people, technical people also, and most importantly, investors. So if you were, let's say you were a decision maker in any industry, let's take, for example, logistics, financial services, whatever, what would be the first thing you would be doing at the moment with all of this information and with all of these options? Where would you start? And what would be the timeline of adoption of AI? What would be the solution per timeline, like from now going into the next few years?
Okay, that's a big question made small.
Maybe we can start with just what would you do right now? What would be the first thing you would be interested to implement right now?
So right now, I would automate any of the micro tasks that cross my way. That's one thing. Then I would, so that the next level, I would basically try to not to go beyond the task and look on a process level. So a set of tasks. This actually just shows a task is a set of tasks is just increasing the complexity that you try to stretch and to cover with more or less one solution. And there, the higher the complexity is, the higher the amount of basically states that this process can end up is, and the bigger the chance is that you will not have, when you start to train by data, right? By input output, right? Your model, or trying to fine tune a model to that, then you will basically see only a fraction of the possible reality. And this is where a human is excelling, right? If something that he had to do from A to B since years, and now something happens and he has to take from C to B, yeah, then he basically has to think a shot, but then he will basically change his flow, right? So being able to adapt. And this is what I'm saying, that there, I think an agentic approach has to be, and this is where I'm saying that an agentic approach has to be able to validate itself, right? Its assumptions, its approach to process from A to B, to detect an anomaly, and decide how to go about it, learn basically from the feedback it gets, because it can collaborate, right? And adjust its workflow to the new reality. So self-adapting to a certain extent, right? So just to make it clear, if you try to go to say an agent has to adapt to everything, well, then you have the universal intelligence. We are not universal intelligent. If you understand to not go so far, just reduce and just increase the flexibility. Make a system that is a bit more flexible than a hard-coded workflow, right? Even if you have a model that is doing that, and it's a classifier that is hard coded for a certain input to put output basically class A, B, C. It's still hardwired, right? It's specialized, but it's hardwired. So how can you make something that is basically adapting to that? Retraining is something that you would do with such a model. And this is already your first level of self-adaptation, but there's no reasoning. And now I'm getting to the point on how can such a system basically know that is wrong and to which extent it is wrong. One component right now came up, and this is one of the hottest things I think we achieve with this LLMs, is hallucination. And why is it hallucination? And when you have a system that encounters an anomaly, let's say you have your code in place to detect that, and it has to come up with a new plan. And now you can go and, well, randomly shuffle your code and come up with something. If you do it just randomly, right? Even if you try to go with genetic algorithms or evolutionary algorithms, this is what they would do. It would take you way too long in a real production solution scenario, right? To converge to a new plan that is serving the cause. And what was the LLM hallucinations are doing, and I don't say that it's necessarily only about text. We see that the same thing approach to time series and have been also applied to images and so on. So it's not only about text, but still with this hallucination, we can basically generate alternative action plans that are in the space of our reality, It's even very important that the LLMs have been trained based on text that has been written by humans for humans, because there are a lot of basically sequences of events, of entities that describe how the world basically is perceived and handled by us. So whatever an LLM is hallucinating, it will occur in this space that makes sense for us. And you have to be aware that there's a nice representation of that. If you take the combination of all possible states in the universe, there's a lot of like mumble jumble white space. So states that are just not relevant for our reality. And if you just go by random and by some evolutionary recombination approaches, right, you will end up a lot of time in the space that has no relevance to us. And the LLMs right now are able to generate in our relevant space. And that's why you basically can converge fast enough. I don't say how fast, but hopefully fast enough to a plan that is applicable. Yeah, that you can test. And then you can see, oh, this is not working, but I'm changing it like that. Whatever change you are doing, you're still in your space. Your space is way narrower, or that's why you basically can get to converge to a workable new plan. And then you get your feedback. And just because it's workable doesn't mean that it's the right one, right? But you, in general, you can converge the way we humans converge, right? And this is something that where potentially we'll have to see this 70% accuracy of the today LLMs might be good enough for the time being, right? And if not, we'll see. Then you can basically improve it by fine tuning. Again, it's only, I'm just making up a number, but it's only 2,000 samples. Financially, from perspective of effort, yeah, doable. Yeah, can do a person in a week can curate a data set of 2,000 samples, right? So everything doable. Was not doable earlier, where you needed 300,000 or million of samples, depending on the use case. And this is a second step. So this is basically, that's why the whole Gen AI part is such a unlocker, and it makes it possible to think that an agentic system could be built with the current opportunities. But I would only start with that for the more complex things, and the more complex things are trying to automate a whole process, right? And there you get one last answer on that, because you asked earlier about that. Should we build a end-to-end model? There was already this discussion a few years back, right? Or do you chain models? And there's a critics about chaining models, specialists. We're talking about experts. Yeah, but it's actually same story, just differently told. And yeah, if you chain things, well, the whole system is as weak as your weakest element. And if you train a model end to end, yeah, then, well, you basically don't have this weakest element, but you most probably need way more data, so samples to train on. And the chance is that in your process, you have an overlap of domains. As soon as you have overlap of domains, chances are that your model will have a hard time to convert. So, or will have its weak spots. Wherever you have an overlap, it will just produce more errors than in other spots. And this is something that you have to test and know and mitigate. So there are downsides on end-to-end approach, and there are downsides on chained approach of mixed experts.
Okay. So you think at the end of the day, it's just gonna be one for different, like one for specific approaches and one for specific one. It just depends on the use case, I guess. But I still believe that,
it's a mixture.
I still feel that as the models get better and as we come closer to AGI, some people claim, of course, we're not so much far, conversion more towards the earlier, which is the end-to-end.
I think the AGI discussion is still the same like it was down the road with a Turing test. It's a matter of definition, what you define as an AGI. And I just heard, like, you just raise the bar, kind of. There was one guy saying, like, actually OpenAI will never reach AGI, because it's said that they have a statement in their statutes that as soon as they reach AGI, they have to close. I think it's just an anecdote, but I think that the definition of AGI is something worth talking and worth exploring, because it definitely increases the capabilities of the models. But I think it's a mixture of, if you try to bet only on one dimension of it, this is what I'm trying to avoid here, right? Trying to bet only on, you go with LLM, put enough data to it, and then you reach AGI, and then you can have your agent, right? Maybe you'll have to prove that, but please don't prove only that, because there's also good reasons to take mixture of experts. And it's also because you see, like, training a big, huge model has a lot of run costs, right? How much does a reasoning step in O3? I don't know, thousands of dollars for one question. Okay, that's not sustainable. We know that, right? But of course, first make it work and then optimize. We also see that there are a lot of totally new architectures of achieving similar results. I don't have them right now on my head in the image generation, and especially in the 3D transformation of image in 3D, right? I just heard of an approach. It was totally not diffusion. I forgot the name. Anyway, but if you look around, you see basically a lot of scientific teams don't basically narrow down their view on, oh, it's all about transformers, it's all about attention, and that's done. I would say it's good. Will this basically be the AGI solution? We'll see, maybe, because they're not stopping. But there are other candidates out there who also have a chance. If you don't have to bet on something, keep your options open.
And don't put your eggs in one basket.
take what serves the cause, take what you have at your hands. So it's rather the possibility and what the task really, you try to solve the task as efficient as possible and done. So I think if someone is selling a certain technology, a certain approach as the winner, most probably this person is building that, has to believe it. Because you have to put all in, to go all in something to achieve that. So by that, you have no chance to be open to other directions.
Yeah, but speaking
and that's
of
okay.
that,
That's fair enough. But I'm not the guy who is building this kind of models.
Well, speaking of that, and I would love to take the last maybe 10 minutes or so, just again, because I think we delved slightly a bit really deep on the technical level, right? So if I was a business person, I'm really out of breath already right now, which is good. And I think it's good to have both kind of point of view, because what you mentioned makes sense. Actually, a lot of the advocates right now, what a lot of the decision makers from industries besides tech, that a lot of the advocates, a lot of spoken people are selling their own products, right? Are they like solution providers or like solution builders and CEOs and stuff? So it's good to keep it like on their surface. So coming back to the question I asked, so you answered me in a way. So if you were a business decision maker on a company on an industry besides technology, what you will be focusing right now is to build agents, but to build automations in domains where ROI is significant. It makes sense. But to take it a step back, how would you choose first in which department, in which type of workflows, in which categories of workflows, and what will be the first step you start with? Are you going to start with sales? Are you going to start with different kind of departments? How you would identify this?
Well, the way I did it for Hapag. So I think in most companies, at least the big ones, communication is prevalent. There are people sitting together, communicating with each other and with their customers, and only then a business is running. So communication is one of the biggest area where you can find most probably potential for automation. So this manual task there's one reason for that. Yeah, sure. I mean customer service. So everybody's is going for customer service, support, help desk, but also basically. So support is maybe too small. Now with the LLMs, you can basically almost automate that. So this RAG-based assistance, right? More or less exactly about that. You don't need your network of people, or when you're new in a company, they don't have to give you a senior guy who could really drive something. No, he has to invest his time in you to learn. Well, now you can have an assistant that can cover like 70% of the thing. So you get from zero to valuable employee with way less invest from the company's resources. So that's why. So this is knowledge management, knowledge transfer, knowledge capturing. This is also, I think, an important part. Communication is right now it's something where it starts. A customer is basically wants to use your service, right? And your service, there are always some kind of a complexity. So the customer has to know which kind of a term do you need to hear to know what he actually wants. And what kind of a price, what options do you have? So what can he even ask for? So of course, if I can call a human, then this human from the inside of the company will do this translation for me. So I am just saying I want to transport wood from Norway to US, but I don't have a clue how to order this and what it takes, what you need to know. And then the internal person says, okay, I see. Then first of all, I need to know at which port, and then what kind of a wood and how much, and so on. So he guides you through this, right? A human is doing that. Now, we try to digitalize this process because one-to-one human doesn't scale very good. The companies are offering input masks. And now the customer is coming and seeing an input mask that is a concept of that company on how they think they should represent this information input. And basically, you have to know, please put in your commodity. Let's say it like that. You have an input field for commodity. Do you have a clue what commodity is or what the HS code is? Well, maybe this customer knows. Well, a specialist, there's a reason why there are logistic specialists out there who then, of course, know what that is. But in general, it's a very high level. And then let's say Hapag-Lloyd has its form and the way how they guide the customer through the process of booking something, right? And Maersk, well, they have their different concept. And Evergreen has, again, a different concept. And you as a customer, just making a case here, you're not talking here about 10 euro order. We are talking here about 200,000, $1 million order. So of course I'm trying to basically place my requests for a quote from different providers, right? And I have to deal with their concepts and learn and understand how to input the information there, right? That is cumbersome. That is killing basically not only time, also customers, right? Introducing a lot of error. You have the problem that you can't give the people always a people one-on-one, just clarify that. And here's a chance. Here's a chance where you with LLM can basically finally close this gap to a level that, and this goes beyond what we had before the LLMs, right? The chatbot, customer service chatbots, I built something like that. I can tell you, it was pain in the back. At the end of the day, still there was value to it because we actually could cover like 40% of the incoming questions we could cover. So we saved the customer service 40% of the requests. That's a huge lot, right? In such a world. But with the today possibilities, we're talking about 70, 80% of the cases, right? And one thing, you don't have to be as static as you are. You had to design the flows, the question answering flows, and think what could be upfront. By that, you basically end up to not cover all the cases. And with the GPT approach right now, the big freedom and still be useful. So this is one speed spot communication, getting now boiling it down, depicted one reasoning where value on both sides can, on the customer side, but the customer doesn't have to know how Maersk is thinking or how Evergreen is thinking or Hapag-Lloyd is thinking. They just take whatever they said to the one, just take it, copy paste to the next one, and they have to take care of their complexity, right? They are the experts of their service offering.
But that's a good. That's a good. So that's okay. So I get like the point. So you mentioned communication.
Let me extend that once.
Sure.
Let me just extend it once because it's just the beginning. So I just hope it made it understand where the value is. And now it doesn't stop between customer and company. Within the company, there are chains of departments, and these departments are complex. So when me from a HR department, right, have to talk with a financial department, I don't have a clue about their business. So there are a lot of digitalization things there where I can enter a form or use a button in a software, right? But I need to know which button. I need to know what it's triggering. I need to know what it's meaning. They're the same thing. Put in a GPT-based assistant and reduce the friction there. This is immediately you basically gain millions, and depending on the size of the company, you save time. Basically, you don't lose expertise when people are leaving the company. New people are ramped up way earlier, and in big companies, this has a scale effect. Small companies is not so obvious, and this was just basically saying, you asked me what is a sweet spot, automate communication. GPT is basically solving a lot of this problem, and then you can go one step deeper and still use LLM and GPT, where you have an increased capability to understand text unstructured information and prepare it basically, and eventually in some narrow cases even fully automatically automate the step, and in some cases basically be a recommender, so prepare the input to a level where the user just can scan confirm. This reduces the intellectual effort of a person immensely, and you will be able to process, instead of 3 tasks per day, 20 tasks per day. That is productivity increase, right? Just by free recommendation. And I don't want to say you increase accuracy by that and so on. So there are a lot of other effects where quality even increase. So you increase productivity and quality. And I'm stopping, and more to that. Yeah. So
Yeah,
there's huge
but you made the
potential.
point. I think so. So the point is the biggest power of LLMs is basically communication. It's unstructured to structured information, vice versa, which is then the best use case sweet spot, which all companies need, regardless of industries, is transfer of information, whether it's the customer facing, internal, etc., etc. So that's actually like a good way to summarize it for like a lot of business decision makers and such. So I would maybe finally add one last solution, or one last question on this part, which is, okay, so that would be the first part, right? And it, again, just to paint the picture for these decision makers, right? So the first of many solutions shifts is already happening right now, and there's a lot of options that they can start with. What would be the shift looking like in the next years? And this is not only from kind of how much AI is implemented within each business, but also in the workforce and the talent market. So how would that change? How would the workflows internally change? And is this something that, how would the shift look like for companies? Is this something that's going to be like strong? It needs to be like, because everything is moving fast, it needs to be done a little bit more harshly, a little bit more faster? Or do you think still it's going to be a slow adaptation going forward, especially to change the type of workflows that's being done, how humans and AI agents collaborate, and what type of workforce and just the overall structure of workforce look like?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it depends on, like, in US, you will have a different speed of adoption than in Germany, for sure. But I think that because I saw it, 2000 we had the more or less the beginning of the internet era, and 2005 basically we had the first feasible business models out there with Amazon and Google and you name it. So starting with 2005, it was just as an example, right? There was no reason for any serious enterprise, so big company actually, to stay with paper and to stay with bare metal and more or less on-prem systems. Just talking about systems. Many companies right now, they're still basically writing wrapper for their COBOL code. Financial sector, or Fortran, whatever. So this is, and we have 2025, right? So I have evidence basically that most of the industrial structures, they cannot shift fast enough for that. So it will take 10 to 20 years till you have an adoption at a level that that you really can say, okay, we switch from the legacy systems to the new systems, and to the new, and of course also shifted all the processes, and the jobs description will change. But you will definitely see in the next 10, 20 years still similar to same job descriptions, because they have their assets in the way. So at some point when they built the company, the enterprise, right, they developed a certain structure with certain processes, with certain assets, with a certain infrastructure, with machines that costed millions, and they need to basically run this whole system, right, to get their money back. And refactoring is something that you have to be able to afford to do it, and something you cannot just take a part of it and put AI in it and then hope that it works, because the rest is incompatible. So making the rest compatible takes time and money that you need to have. And by that, I can say the 10, 20 years, I feel very secure to say in 20 years, you will still have companies who will basically ask you, can you help us start with AI?
So do you think this shift is going to take, again, more economical power and size from industries and countries which are not adopting as fast towards others that are? Because the question is, if you go to sit down with a business decision maker,
Yes.
is why would
Yes.
I need to shift right now, right? What is is it more of a vitamin, more of a plus, or more of a risk? Like, is it an existential risk that they're over?
Well, it depends how fast reality happens in your sector, with your competitors. So if you have a competitor that finds a way and does the shift, whichever company, and this is what I'm trying to recommend to everybody, please become an AI first company as soon as possible, right? So whatever you do, don't build it with legacy approach. Build it with the possibilities of AI. And what this will bring is it will increase your productivity. And I'm not talking by increasing your productivity by 5% or 10%. I'm talking about increasing your productivity in some sectors only by 30%, and in some cases by 70%. In general, I do see a chance that you can increase your productivity by 50%. In the same time, you can increase your quality at a similar rate. Yeah, it's very hard to give a number. Now, if you have a competitor who is taking on that now, right? And in 5 years, maybe he translated to have a leap forward of 10% productivity and quality. You already have a problem. Give it another 5 years, and it's not linear. Because the more productivity there is, the more resources they have, the more time they have to optimize. So the distance between you and your competitor will not be linear. It's not exponential, right? But it definitely has a slope, and you will not be able to catch up. That's a problem. So that's why I would say it is existential. And if you don't see it, well, all of us have to die at some point, and we will be very surprised at that point. So yeah, it's your decision.
But can we add also not only the regular competitors? For example, let's say you're in a service industry, right? Whatever, over in accounting, financial services, any other kind of service. The regular competitors would be like other currently similar companies, but also now that a lot of shifts is happening, that a lot of AI agents are coming into the workforce. So that means a lot of fully software solutions or software providers would be able to compete, like, and replace whole, for example, law firms' work or audit firms' work. Do you think there's a chance, or what would these kind of industries transform into? I don't know. I know it's not your specific knowledge because you're not part of those industries, but from your technology standpoint point of view, what do you think?
Yeah, so right now, see the capabilities of the available technology is overrated. So that's really on a hysteric level. Whenever I try to really take an LLM and solve a problem like it is said that it will replace my job, I'm sorry, they just fail. They are like a companion who brings me from an empty sheet of paper to a first draft and allows me, basically then triggers me to do the rest, right? But actually they can bring, sometimes it's depending on the complexity of what I try to do, right? But it's between 30% of help to 70%, that's all, right? In most of the cases. And since, as I said, an employee is not covering only one task, only one perspective. An employee is covering an amount of tasks and expertise and connection to an amount of domain areas like departments, and building basically the connecting element like that, and has colleagues who are doing the same, right? Collaborating.
Yeah.
till you get to the point with the capabilities of the LLMs and reasoning models, DeepSeek, no matter what, to replace that, I don't see it right now. So everybody, 2025 will happen. No, sorry, it will not happen. Pretty sure it will not happen 2026. I feel pretty relaxed that it will not happen in the next 5 years. Some tasks will be
That's a big
replaced,
statement.
but yes, yeah, I know. I mean, it's a statement. We'll see. I think feel safe because everybody who is giving a statement is guessing, right? So I'm allowed to guess as well. What I see right now, the delta between what they that their solutions are capable of and what the solutions are really capable of, it's not near to what they state. So that's why, and everybody builds on what is said. I mean, 90% of the who show me please the people who really did this model assessment. They're just looking on boards of comparison, right, and reading numbers that someone has written there. And I'm pretty sure they're doing a good job, but there's also a lot of voices like saying maybe not so accurately tested, right? So who cares? You don't have the capacity basically to really test what is said. And I do have basically, I need to test because I have to build solutions and they're not working if I don't find the right way. And I can tell you they're far away from replacing jobs, even software engineering. I'm using it to develop software engineer. I just basically give it a try to build this small watchdog for a file system. It helped, but it forgot all the time half of the things of the requirements. I gave it away. At the end, I can tell you, I would have been faster if I would have just turned on my hat with my experience, of course. That's helping. But so the value is still there. Someone without my experience would have been able to do something that it would have taken this person a month or so, right? So value is there, no problem, but not replacing jobs. Sorry, not.
If I were to summarize your take, that means which actually bring all of the points that we mentioned to a good conclusion, which is this is where we like business decision makers can start already. This is the sweet spots. The next 5 years or so would be more for AI workflow specific automations. And this is, of course, you mentioned also where would be the first example of it, but also there's multiple ones. And then you mentioned after that would be like full employees replacement. So that means not only one specific workflow or one skill, but a full set of skills and the ability to switch between them and also change them. So that would be after a few years.
I think I sense, I'm not very, it's not crystal clear right now in my head, but I sense that the whole discussion of replacement of jobs by AI, right, is still based on the legacy thinking of companies built of employees who are covering a certain task. AI is disrupting that. The processes will not be the same. The job descriptions will not be the same. So, and the whole discussion is actually translating the legacy situation and replace a human with an AI. And I think that I will disrupt the whole situation in a different way, not in a way that the carpenter will be, or the bookkeeper, or the lawyer, or whatever will be replaced. They will be enhanced, and that's why I'm saying actually they will be enabled to be more productive and ensure more quality, because I have to say quality takes a whole bunch of work, and often the value is very indirect. That's why often companies are at the end safe on that corner. So as long as a product gets sold, then covered, then it's good enough. But they cannot see basically how many customers they actually lose because they are not okay with the quality, and they're blind about that. And they would invest more in the quality because they are experts in it. But because of that, quality is also compliance and all the stuff. There's a lot of tedious work that has no direct connection to the value. And this is something that you can automate and increase through this new Gen AI or AI based opportunities we have.
Yeah.
So I think that's why you will. I would rather think in. I think I see that organizations cannot change overnight. Yeah, just because AI hopefully will be able to take over all the stuff that we have done with the whole department right now. Right? You can test it, right? And maybe you find a way, and I can bet with you, you will end up with something that will cover a part of that department. And if it's enough, you will restructure that department to something that is complementing that. Actually, at the end, you want to increase your productivity or the turnaround of invest to your ROI at the end of the day, right? But you don't. So if you put your head on it, you will basically say how it would look at the end. And when you build it and deploy it, you will see what didn't work, where your assumptions were not so correct. But anyway, you bring it to an end. Hopefully, you don't give up, and then you have a solution. And I bet with you that the vision that was at the beginning of the idea and the reality at the end will be different. It will serve the cause, because else it's you would cancel it, right? But that's exactly like maybe you have basically get rid of some employees, right? Saying like, okay, if we can run the process like this, we actually don't have this task any longer, and this task also, and this task also, and actually right now we have 20 people who basically have to do that. We will be able to do it with 10, but it's not the job that is replaced. It's just the capacity that that is increased per person per, and sure, some of the jobs, some maybe there are jobs that are very trivial, right?
Yeah.
They may vanish to some extent, but I think it's old thinking, trying to do prediction with old thinking, applying really bleeding edge possibilities. That's why I'm not following this line of thought. I'm trying to simulate in a different way. Like I just described it, you really have to go in it and simulate with a knowledge of the reality. So knowing that O3 is not able to develop my software based on what I tell it. Yeah. Um, it's it's a wish thinking. There are some very special cases where you can showcase that, right? But for the everyday life is not consisting of these showcases. There are 90% of reality around it, and there I don't see that it stands this reality. That's why I don't follow this.
Okay, Adrian. I have two last questions for you to conclude this prediction, kind of, and one just like interesting one at the end or funny one at the end. So the last one, I'm not sure if you heard about him, but do you heard about Naval Ravikant?
I hope I've heard. I think yes, but I don't. I don't
Yeah,
recall. I know a lot more Ravikants. That's why.
Yeah, he's kind of infamous or famous, whatever you say, in Silicon Valley. So he's early investor in, I believe, Uber and like just multiple other large, successful companies. Anyway, so and he's also like a great philosopher. I love to read his tweets and stuff. One thing he did predict, or at least he mentioned on the podcast, he mentioned that he would predict that in a new world of workforce, knowledge work would become like gig work. That means you wake up in the morning, you don't have one job specified, one role specified that you do every day. You wake up and you have different kind of gigs that you can opt for different kind of companies, and you would choose, okay, I will do this. You finish that, you deliver that, and then you can proceed. Is this something that goes in line, or is completely different from what you would imagine?
I'm not so sure why you need AI for that, but this can and is reality today already. I mean, the whole freelancer platforms are more or less exactly that. The automatic Turk from Amazon is also something in that direction. Like the idea is not mind blowing right now. Maybe it will be more possible since you basically can it's like me, for example, right? So a few years back, I having been a lot into backend development, still of course having some front end development, but Next.js was new for me. Well, it took me 2 weeks to get from zero to my first web app, and now I getting along. So there's with the help of LLM. I don't rely on a human to get good enough answers to get going. Yeah, it enables me to do way more. So by that, of course, it increases the opportunity to opt for jobs where you have maybe are not a specialist now, but you can get fast enough specialists to deliver. Yeah. So yeah, I do see that.
But just to expand, I believe mostly what he means is that companies would not have so much more fixed employees because
Ah,
right now the norm is fixed employees, and of course there's freelancing for specific tasks and roles. He basically, I think his concept is the switch where companies would have more agents and very few fixed employees, and most of the human employees would be on a gig basis. It's not like on a full-time basis.
so honestly, I do understand the logic behind it, and I would take myself normally time to think it through. That's why I will not say yes, no, it's wrong. I do understand it is an option. Right now, it's not like blowing my mind, like say, oh yes, that's it. But
Okay,
maybe I don't see it. So I will think about that. And my only statement that I can see, yeah, I understand why this could be a future, a way that I'm not totally convinced, but I think I have to
I
challenge
think
it in myself.
I'm more convinced because also I believe you heard the people speaking about the next $1 billion company is going to be built by or run by 3 people. Did you heard about like these kind of predictions also?
Honestly, I'm running my business. So for what I'm doing here, I would need 4 peoples. Hmm. It's happening already. And
Yeah, fair enough.
it's not like GPT is doing all the job, but it's helping me a lot. A lot. So yeah, there's no question that this
Okay.
but that's what I'm saying about productivity.
Yeah. Then that brings us to
And
the
maybe
last
there will
question.
be, maybe there's one thing that I'm seeing now.
Uh-huh.
Maybe I don't know if it's so much about, maybe we'll have way more companies.
Yeah,
It's not
because
like lots of people waiting home to get a gig, but maybe we just have way more companies because it's no longer so
difficult.
expensive, so
Yeah,
hard to it. Yeah.
exactly. And it's same. Also, when you look at it for apps right now, now with just a prompt, almost you can create like a fully working app. So of course, before like you needed a strong team to have an app. Now just one human can have multiple apps. So if we were to take that concept from apps to businesses, which basically provide services, but pretty much the same, that's what you have. So just like you launch an app, you can launch a business. But anyway, coming back to the final question, then in 10 years, once this happens and you can clone yourself, Adrian, to have a clone for you that decide like you, dictate like you, hire other AI agents and humans to run the businesses and stuff, what would you be doing all day?
Yeah.
Or what would you like to be doing all day?
Definitely doing more sports and taking care of my health. I'm serious about that. I can tell you that I would definitely invest more time in living my life and having the luck to being born in a society like we are, having the education. So by that, basically have an expanded view. There's this plenty of things to experience, to do. And I think many people have. I do hear about this question, and I see that many people are struggling. So why should I paint a painting if an AI can generate hundreds of that? Like, who cares? Let them do it. It's my painting. It's an experience. This is living, right?
Yeah.
And so having more time for life, I would look forward for that. I don't know, for example, how the whole thing might change eventually, the whole value distribution thing. So money will be money, the same thing will be, I think things might change from different angles. This is something I already said before. I am careful about trying to envision the future only from one vector.
Okay.
Even 3. I think there are many vectors, and they will basically, the AI itself will influence many vectors, and the consequences, so what comes out, the result of this influence, will impact themselves. So it will be a cascade. That's why it's so hard to basically predict. And this cascade will basically evolve like 360 degrees, multidimensional, not thinking only in 3 dimensions and time or 4 dimensions. Be aware it is multidimensional. So that's why I think that I'm fairly, I feel secure to state something, because I know that all the others are guessing as well. Nobody can basically estimate what happens on 120 dimensions. That this is a small hint of saying replacing workforce, yeah, okay, and staying home, yeah, okay. Will there be money still? Wait, I don't know.
I agree with you at the point about experience is all what it matters. Because I also really, really much see this from everything from this point of view. It's saying, for example, I would usually or normally compare myself, let's say running a business or being music, doing music. I would say, okay, but maybe I'm not the best in the world, or maybe someone else can do better business or better music or whatever. But at the end of the day, the only thing that exists truly and the only thing that indeed is real from my point of view is my experience. So at the end of the day, did I experience a moment of being a business owner or like a musician, or I did not? It doesn't matter if there's millions of other people who do in business or millions of other agents who create better music or AI to create better music. It's my experience that I will experience. So, and that's the only true things in this universe, regardless of what happens. So yeah, here's
I think
to good experience.
we shouldn't forget also, because we're very still very focused on AI, and we tend to forget that we are living in a real world. Um, and no matter what someone believes or not, nature doesn't give a damn shit on whatever high technology stuff. And you might know how much stable infrastructure is required for all this AI stuff that we are doing, and all the machines that we are using to get the value out of that, and what kind of a societal stable situation it is required to keep the systems in place. So, and we see basically that quite some earthquakes happen all over the world, on political, social perspective, but also from resource perspective and ecological perspective. We'll see. Maybe everything will end up totally different if one of these negative aspects makes a um, it's a German approach. So we'll win whatever. So and destroy the required infrastructure that is needed to basically leverage. So it is a head-to-head situation. Let's not forget about that. Also, with the right now, it's since we are in a very, at least in the countries that we are now, stable and favorable situation, we can think about wealth and uh, so the nice
Innovation.
things of the world. Yeah, maybe in 10 years we'll just have other priorities, or in 20 years, who cares? And I still see a very good. I'm very happy to see that AI is coming forward, because it might be one of the things that will help us overcome some of this not so nice things that could happen. But this is also, that's why I'm saying, yet another perspective, yet another uh, vector to look, and then that's why it's you want to predict something, you can only
Yeah.
make a prediction on narrowing the scope, like saying, okay, saying that this is stable, this is that, this is that. How do you think things would evolve? This is how you can make basically predictions or projections in the future, and you can, and it's useful. It's useful because you basically can make trigger points and recognize why the life is happening and things are happening. Then you basically see, okay, which of my potential futures are coming to reality, and you will reiterate on your predictions. So it's actually the old old thing. It's always worth to make a plan. It's not about and to try to basically fulfill that plan. But life is happening when it hits the fan, and then you have to adjust your plan, and then yeah. So just not to forget about that perspective.
And with that as a conclusion, thank you, Adrian. We went way longer than anticipated, but I think it was great. I think we delved first into like a great technical depth into what it means to be agent, what it means for these AI agents to be accurate, to be productive, to converge, And then, of course, we try to go a little bit from a business point of view, go a little bit macro level. Okay, what kind of implementations can be done right now? What kind of implementation would be able to be done in the future? How to get there and when it's going to be there, which you mentioned, like it's going to be quite some time. And then, we finish with some philosophical kind of prediction and a retrospection on the current time. Anything else you want to add? Otherwise, been a pleasure.
No, actually, I'm looking forward for the next session where we maybe could go more focus on one topic to be more concrete. So I hope it was not basically too broad. Yeah.
But I think we definitely will get like the structure good. This is again my first and at least your first here, a kind of like interview. But it's only gonna get better from now. So again, thank you, Adrian. See you guys next time.
Thank you, Yasser. See you. Bye bye.